Coming up next, Miss Lilia Lewis, Building a Better You, right here on To God Be the Glory radio broadcast.
Hi, I'm Lilia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of Building a Better You. Now, we're going to stay in the book of Daniel, where we have been previously, where we learned about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace and how they came to be there and how they came out of the furnace and how King Nebuchadnezzar had put them there because they wouldn't worship their golden image that he had built. But then in the end he realized God, our God, had saved them from the fiery furnace, and they walked out unharmed. And King Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged how wonderful our God was. But at the same time, I think he had the impression that our God was only the God of heaven, because he still, I think, thought that he was God on earth. And that's why he had that image built, and he wanted people to worship. And that's why they kept on worshiping their gods. Well, today we're going to talk about what happened after King Nebuchadnezzar's death. Now remember, Daniel had told him, he told him that there would be 3 kingdoms after him. So today we're going to talk about the first of those kingdoms, and that was reigned by Nebuchadnezzar's son, whose name was also Belshazzar. Now initially, that name was given to Daniel because of his wisdom and his insight, and the king named him that because he named Daniel after one of their gods because of his wisdom and insight. But at the same time, now he was saying then that their gods, with an S, gave Daniel his wisdom and insight. So that still led me to believe that even though he saw the power of our God, he was thinking our God was heavenly only. So today we're going to learn about that first reign with his son Belshazzar. And we're going to learn that, and we're going to go to chapter 5, and we're going to start under the reign, and this comes under the heading of the handwriting on the wall. Now the first thing I noticed about Belshazzar, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, his beliefs were still the same regarding those gods. He still worshipped, he believed that all these gods gave them everything that they needed. So now that he's in charge and he's on the throne, he decided to have this great feast. But see, the difference was, he told his men, go get those golden vessels. The ones they had taken when they took over Judah, they had locked them away. Nebuchadnezzar never used the golden vessels. They were very sacred in the Jewish history. So they were in the temple of our God. But now that his son is reigning, he don't care. So he's like, go get those golden vessels. We're going to drink our wine out of them. Which was that was a no-no, because these were sacred vessels. Now he's turning them into wine goblets. So they brought them forth. He was going to have them for his family and his friends and all the higher echelon and all that type of thing. So while they were drinking out of the wine, out of the goblets, using these special vessels for goblets, now they started singing and praising the gods, just having a good time. And that wasn't what they were supposed to be doing. because they were praising these gods. They had gods made out of gold and silver and brass and iron and stone and wood. They had gods for everything. But look at chapter 5 now in the book of Daniel. Go to verse 5. Now while they're drinking wine out of the vessels and worshiping these gods, look what happens. In that same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and it wrote against the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. And then his countenance was changed. That means his whole facade. He couldn't believe what he saw. I guess I wouldn't believe if I saw fingers writing on the wall either. But he was so troubled. His joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote against one another. That means they started banging against each other. His knees started banging against each other. And then the king cried out. He cried out for his astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers, because now he wanted to know, what is that writing? What does it mean? And what does it say? Anybody who can tell me what that means, read it to me. I'll give you all the riches you want, and I'll make you the third ruler in the kingdom. So they all came forward, and they all kept looking at it, trying to decipher what it said. But they couldn't. But the queen was hearing all this commotion going on. So she went in, and she said to the king, she said, well, what about Daniel? And here's what she said to the king. Let's go to verse 11. She said, there's a man in thy kingdom, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. Gods with an S again. So she's still saying that all this wonderful stuff is coming from their gods. And she's telling the king, and in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, meaning Daniel, whom your father the king made master of the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and showing of hard sentences, and dissolving of doubt were found in this Daniel, whom your father named Belshazzar, and he named him because after the gods, because of his wisdom. So she's telling him, let Daniel be called, and he'll show you the interpretation on the wall. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king spake unto Daniel, and he said, are you that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom my father brought out of Jewry, whom my father took from the Jewish faith and taught them how to become Babylonians, and gave them Babylonian names? And he said, I've heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And the king said, well, he made the same deal with him, so to speak. He says, well, if you can interpret what's on this wall, and if you can tell me what it means, read it to me and tell me what it means, I will give you all the riches, and I'll make you third ruler in the kingdom. So now we're going to go to verse 18, because now we're going to see what Daniel said that it meant. Now let's go to verse 18, and first of all he's saying, O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom. So he's already letting him know, it's not these gods you're worshiping. It's the Most High God. And the Most High God gave him a kingdom, majesty, glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all the people trembled in fear before him. And why? Because he could slew whomever he wanted, meaning the king. He would kill whoever he wanted. He would let live whoever he wanted. He would set up whoever he wanted. And he would put down whoever he wanted. But when his heart, meaning his father's heart, when his heart was lifted up and his mind was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne. And deposed means he was removed. He was removed from his throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men. And his heart was made like the beast. And his dwelling was in the wild. And they fed with him grass like the oxen, and his body was wet with dew of heaven, and he stayed like the animals in the field until he knew that the Most High God ruled the kingdom of men, and that he, meaning God, appointed it over whomever he chose. And you, his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled your heart either, even though you knew these things. But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and you and all your friends have drunk wine from them. And you have praised your gods of gold and silver and brass and iron and wood and stone, which can't even see you, they can't hear you, they don't even know you. And the real true God, in whose hands thy breath is, you have not glorified. So he was telling him, you don't even, the God who gives you breath, you won't even acknowledge because you're too busy worshiping these artificial gods. And now I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read it and tell you what the interpretation on the wall means. And it means that God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. That thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. That means your time is almost up. God has numbered your days, and your kingdom will be finished. You're in the balances, it means you leave a lot to be desired, because you're not doing what you should be doing. And your kingdom, is going to be divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. And guess what? Belshazzar said, okay, well, thank you for telling me. Thank you for telling me. So he didn't care. He thanked him. All he wanted to know was what it said. He didn't take heed to anything as to what Daniel was saying the consequences were going to be. He simply gave Daniel the reward, and he said, okay, now I make you third ruler of the kingdom. So he paid no attention to the fact that his days were numbered, that his kingdom was finished, and all he did was go back and finish drinking his wine and worshiping his gods. Defiance of the Lord. Well, let's look at verse 30, because it says, in that same night was Belshazzar the king slain. Now, if that's not numbering your days, I don't know what is. But he never paid attention. So he was slain that very night. And it says, Darius the Median took over the kingdom. And it says he was only 32 years old. Now Darius, he was the one that was under the king. So now that the king was dead, Darius took over. So let's go to chapter 6, because now we're going to see how Daniel ended up going to the lion's den. Because see, Darius, now he's over the kingdom, and the kingdom is set up so that it has 3 presidents that are under Darius, and then under each president they have a prince for each area. And the prince reports to the presidents, and the president reports to the king. But Daniel was the #1 king. And that's where it all began. Because the other 2 presidents and the others that were higher echelon, they all had to report to Daniel. And they did not like that. So what did they start doing? They started trying to figure out a way to get rid of Daniel. So they thought, well, let's see, is he doing anything wrong? They couldn't find anything that he was doing wrong. So they were saying, I know. What we have to do is find out something against him concerning the law of his God. Then we could go to the king about that. So let's go to verse 7 in chapter 6. And it says, all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors, the counselors, the captains, they all got together and decided to establish a royal statute, meaning a law, not an image, a law, to make it a firm decree. That way it can't be changed. So let's make the decree say, whoever shall take a petition of any god, and to take a petition means to make a request. So anybody who makes a petition to any god or man for 30 days except the king, then he has to be cast into the lion's den. So they went and they went before the king with this decree. And they wanted him to sign it. And they explained what it meant. And it's going to be according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, so that nobody could alter it. So it says Darius the king, he signed a writing and a decree. But look at verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house. Now his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, so I guess they were on the side, he knelt upon his knees and prayed 3 times and gave thanks to his God as he had always done. But these men assembled outside, and they found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. So they went to the king, and they reminded him about the decree. And he said, yeah, I remember. They said, remember, nobody was supposed to make any supplication before 30 days? And he said, yeah, I do remember. Now let's go to verse 13. And then they answered, and they said, before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that you have signed, but he makes his petition 3 times a day. Now when Darius heard this, he was very displeased, but he was more displeased with himself. And he set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he thought about it until the going down of the sun, and figuring out how God could deliver him. And then he really was fond of Daniel. And now that he signed his decree, there's not too much he can do about it. So the men went back to the king the next day and said, now the law cannot be changed because the king has established it. So then the king commanded that they bring Daniel and have to take him to the lion's den. Now the king spoke to Daniel, and he said to Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. He will deliver thee. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own insignia, and that purpose was not to be changed. But it really bothered the king, and he went to his chamber, and he just was so outdone. he just sat down. He didn't want to eat. He didn't want any music, and he couldn't sleep. And look at verse 19. It says, he woke up early the next morning and went to haste to the lion's den. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamentable voice. And a lamentable voice means a regretful, sorrowful voice. And he called unto Daniel. And the king spake and said, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou serve continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? And even from inside the den, Daniel said, my God hath sent his angel, and the angel has stopped the lion's mouth, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him, meaning God, innocency was found in me. And also before thee, O king, have I done thee no hurt. Then the king was exceedingly glad, because he really was fond of Daniel. And he commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den, and he was taken up, and no matter of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Because he believed in his God. Do you have that much belief? Do you have that much faith? Do you know what that means? Could you be in any type of situation like that, anything near that, and know that God is going to bless you, protect you, and keep you safe? So once Daniel was out of the lion's den, the king made he had the men who accused him cast into the den. Not only the men that accused him, but their wives, their children, all their family, cast into the lion's den. And then the king made a brand new decree. And let's see what that is in verse 26. The king said, I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men will tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even until the end. And he delivereth, he rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth. And who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered. He prospered and reigned in the kingdom of Darius. Why? Because he trusted in his God and knew that his God was the only one who could save him. He can shut the mouths of lions and bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out of the fiery furnace. If he could do that then, what more can he do for you today? Consider your own trials and tribulations. Consider things that God has already done for you. Think about it. And now I want to share my poem, which is called Trials and Troubles. When troubles seem like mountains, so high and so very tall, we know if we try climbing, surely we will fall. From whence cometh these mountains, we know that we must try. They come from our Creator, the Architect, our guide. These are just the trials to test our faith in Him. Once we let go and give Him control, that's when His works begin. God can't work when we worry. He must see our minds at rest. And that's when He'll come forward and give us His very best. So sit back, close your eyes, and these words you must repeat. Lord, I know You're the shepherd, and we are all Your sheep. I know You're the shepherd, and we are all your sheep. So I ask you, do you consider yourself the sheep? Do you consider God your shepherd? Because that's his purpose, to protect us, to take care of us. Do you put that kind of faith in God so much that you relax when you have trials and tribulations? I always say Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And that's what Daniel does continually. Because that's what Belshazzar said. Your God, whom you worship continually. They're worshiping all those false gods. The ones that don't see, don't hear, don't know, don't recognize, and can't do anything for them. God can do anything. There is nothing that is impossible for God. If you would memorize just the one verse, trust in the Lord with all your heart, because that's what it's all about. It's all about faith, trust, and belief. You've got to learn to continually, this is a daily thing, to read his word, to study his word, to understand, and then to believe and act on it. Believe his word, trust in his word, and know that he will do what he says he will do. If you could memorize just this one verse, it would carry you through so many trials, so many tribulations. You would have so much less worry, so much less frustration, because God specializes. He specializes in things that are impossible. Things that are impossible to us, they don't mean anything to God. That's just something else he does. That's just something else he does. But he can't do his work as long as you're worrying, because you're blocking him. You're blocking him and not making the way clear or available to him. Because that's saying, well, I don't quite trust him in this because I think I can handle it. But you can't. Don't wait to get desperate, as so many of us do. You know, we wait till we ask others' opinions and we try different things, and maybe this will work and maybe that will work. The point is to learn to trust God first. Put him first. Ask him what to do first. Talk to him. Have your daily conversations with him. You know how to talk to God. It's no special way you have to, special words you have to use. It's a conversation of you telling him what's on your mind, where you need his help. But then once you ask, you've got to believe that he's going to come through. When Daniel went in that lion's den, I don't even think he was fearful. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went into the fiery furnace, they walked in. They weren't fearful. The only fearful thing was when they walked out, unharmed. Not a hair on their head was singed. And the Lord, our God, closed the lion's mouth while Daniel stayed in that den overnight. So just ask yourselves, are you one of God's sheep, and is he your shepherd? Sheep don't worry. They don't worry because they trust the shepherd. You don't see sheep worrying. They're walking around eating grass and enjoying the day because they trust their shepherd. So we have to learn to be just like the sheep. And just like that, our God will be our shepherd. And my closing words for today are, You must define yourself by what's on the inside, not by what's going on around you. And until next week, I'm Lilia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.
You've been listening to Building a Better You with Minister Lilia Lewis, right here on To God Be the Glory radio broadcast.
Denise Marshall, North Carolina, listening today. Thanks for joining me.